Larry Loftis is the best-selling author of the non-fiction spy thriller Into the Lion's Mouth, the true story of Dusko Popov, World War II spy, patriot, and the real-life inspiration for James Bond. He's got a new book out, which is just an amazing, amazing story. It's called Codename Lise, the true story of the spy who became World War II's most highly decorated woman. Yes, Larry Loftis, thank you for coming on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. By the way, not just the most highly decorated woman, but the most highly decorated spy, male
Really?
or female.
No,
That's right.
no kidding. That's right. It's an amazing story considering where she came from and how she began. But before we talk about that, how did you find the story?
After I wrote Into the Lion's Mouth, I started searching for another book. And I was a little bit depressed because I thought I'll never find somebody that's as perfect as this guy. I mean, he was the greatest spy. He did all these things. The inspiration for James Bond.
Was he really the inspiration for James Bond?
He really was. Yeah. Read the book. Read the book. But I was frustrated because I thought I'll never find somebody this good. And so for months and months and months, I researched and came up empty. And then eventually I came across, because all of the same books, a lot of these books that are behind me, these World War II books, I found a German spy catcher named Hugo Bleicher. And I read his memoir, Colonel Henry's Stories, the name of it. And it was fascinating because he detailed how he broke into in France, Allied spy networks. He busted one called Inter Ally, which was a huge network, about 100 agents. And then he mentions this woman named Lise, the next spy network that he's going after. Well, he doesn't know that's her code name. Her real name was Odette Sansom. But it was fascinating. And I thought, this woman. And so I started chasing that trail. And so I ordered everything I could find on this woman and went to the archives, the British archives. I read all of her files, Bleicher's files, and Churchill's, her supervising officer, commanding officer. And it was almost too good to be true. And ironically, it's nonfiction, but as all the reviews have said, it's a thriller. And it's even more of a thriller than Into the Lion's Mouth was, as Kirkus reviews, who's not afraid to hammer some people sometimes. They even said every chapter ends in a cliffhanger. Well, I love thrillers, and great thrillers don't even, 50% of them typically. So when I realized what was there in terms of all the things that she did, the things that happened to her, I just thought I have to write this book.
It's one of the things that really got me is where she starts out. I mean, she's basically a housewife in England. Is that fair to say?
And mother of three.
Yeah. And so how does
who thinks of a housewife and mother of three as a potential spy? But she was, and they found her by accident. British intelligence, the British Royal Navy put a message out to everyone saying, "Look, if you've ever been to France, we'd like to get photos. We want photos." Well, they're thinking of D-Day. They're thinking of Normandy and the coastline, and they said, "If you have any photos, please send them in." So she goes. She grew up in France. She was French, so she went through her scrapbook and sent in photos, but she sent them to the wrong address. She didn't send them to the admiral. She sent them to the War Office, and they end up in Section F, which was the SOE's section for France. And so they start looking through this, and they see her, and they're like, this woman, she looks about the right age. She speaks French. Because they had a problem. They needed spies, particularly women who could go in who did not have an accent.
Huh.
Well, what are the odds of that? I mean, if you're looking in England to find someone that speaks French without an accent, good luck. Well, she was a diamond in the rough, and they immediately called her in, and she thought she was just going to get her photos back. Well, they recruited her.
Wow.
And the rest is history. And initially she was like, no, I don't have any military experience. She'd never fired a gun. She'd never done anything, but they trained her. They trained her like they did everyone else in the SOE.
So they send her, where do they send her?
To France.
To France.
That's her homeland. She lands at Cassis, basically in the French Riviera, and her first station was in Cannes, all around that area around Cannes. And it was there that she met her commanding officer, Peter Churchill, no relation to the prime minister, but he was a fantastic circuit leader, had already made 2 tours of France, had done amazing things himself, and that was her commanding officer. And she was supposed to move on to Auxerre and then to Paris, But she hit it off so well with Churchill, and he knew, man, this lady is a fireball. She gets after it. He wanted her, and he sent a cable to London, said, "Hey, can I keep her? I want this woman." So they said, "Well, no, we're sending her." And he said, "No, no, I need her." And then they said, "Okay, you can have her."
So what kinds of things were they doing behind enemy lines?
Well, SOE in particular, they were spies only because they were out of uniform. You're in occupied France. But the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, was designed, as Churchill said, to set Europe ablaze. And so what they wanted to do was blow up the German bridges and supply lines and ammo dumps to harass the Germans, but also to equip with arms and material and ammunition the French resistance, the Maquis. So they would secretly meet up with the French resistance people and say, "Look, meet us next Friday. We've got a plane coming in that's going to drop drop weapons, drop rifles and ammunition." And so that was their job, really, to arm the French resistance and to help them sabotage German supplies.
So one of the things that I found fascinating is this guy I didn't realize that this is how you found the story, but this German spy hunter is like something out of that movie Inglourious Bastards. He's like this master Javier kind of guy hunting down anybody, and he goes after her, right?
Yeah, he's an amazing character, and I tell people he's part Sherlock Holmes, but he's part Sam Gerard in The Fugitive. If you remember Tommy Lee Jones, who's just relentless, just relentless. So he's brilliant, but he's relentless, but he's also charming. He knows when to turn on the charm. He speaks perfect French. He speaks some Spanish. He speaks some English, and he was just great at his job. So when he was a German secret policeman sent to be just a policeman in occupied France, but he was so good at catching spies. They had brought him in initially in Cherbourg to do an interrogation in French of someone that they had captured, and Hugo was so good and so perfect for the job. The Abwehr, which was German military intelligence, said, "Look, we need to borrow you. We're going to take you into our," and so they brought him into the Abwehr and basically turned him loose and said, we'll give you whatever you need. We'll give you resources. We'll give you people. Do what you do. Go capture the British and French spies. Go get them. And he did. And he was probably the best spy catcher in history.
Wow. And he was coming after her. And she, meanwhile, I mean, this is kind of amazing too. This is kind of a love story. I mean, she and this guy Churchill really fell for each other.
And it's this confluence of different things happening at the same time. On the one hand, Odette and Peter Churchill are tasked to do their job, to get the equipment and so forth out, to land planes and all that. But at the same time, they're developing not just a friendship, they're developing a love relationship between them. And over here on the other side that they can't see, Hugo Bleicher has infiltrated their network and he's chasing them.
Wow.
So it almost becomes like Catch Me If You Can, where Tom Hanks is chasing Leonardo DiCaprio because they're moving. They have to keep on the run because they know the Gestapo's 3 steps behind them. So they're always on the run, and he tracks them down. Just incredible, tracks them down and surprises them.
I hate to ask this, but as a moralist, I have to. What happened to the family? She's got a husband and 3 kids she left behind, and she's having this spy love affair. What happened to them?
Yeah, that's a whole nother. I want to be careful not to have any spoilers, but
okay.
That husband had been called off to war, so we'll leave it there probably.
All right. I'll let people find out. The book is Codename Lise, the true story of the spy who became World War II's most highly decorated woman. What do you think when you tell these stories? Is there anything you're trying to communicate to people beside the story, beyond the story itself?
There is. There's actually 2 things. I mean, when you're writing in fiction, the story is the story. Whatever happened. It's part of history. Whether and Into the Lion's Mouth, Codename Lise, I'm dealing with archives. I'm dealing with for the last book for Codename Lise, I'm dealing with the British archives and primary sources. So I have to tell what actually happened. But in doing that, I want the story not to be a boring biography, not to be a boring history book. I want it to be exciting and fun. And so I wrote it as a thriller, just as I did my other book. I wrote it as a thriller because if you find the right story, as they sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and this is just one of those stories. And so I wanted to be fun and entertaining, but retain the message that is there, and that is her incredible survival, and Peter's too, their incredible determination to do their job, to survive, and then once they're captured, not to give the Germans anything. Mm. They were both brutalized, they were both tortured, they were both condemned to death, and they both survived. Mm. But neither one talked. In fact, no one in SEC talked. The operatives in the SOE were so well trained and so well, I guess, selected that none of them talked. And Odette, even though she was brutally tortured, she said not a word and would never give them anything, and really had an indignation about them. And her patent answer was, "I have nothing to say." The Germans knew that she knew the locations of two key people that the Germans wanted: the radio operator for their circuit and another gentleman that had just come in who was going to run another circuit. She knew the locations of both, and they knew that she knew. Mm. So they thought it's just a matter of torture. We'll get it out of her. And she refused, and her patent answer was, "I have nothing to say."
That's great.
They started torturing her, and they say, "Do you want to talk now?" "I have nothing to say."
That's an amazing story. Larry Loftis, the book is codenamed Lise, The True Story of the Spy Who Became World War II's Most Highly Decorated Woman. It is out today, so you can get it right away. Larry, thanks so much for coming on. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Drew. I appreciate it.
Really, that's a great story.